Why am I here? Because since September 11th, we are at war. Because the front line of that war is here in America. Because when I was a war correspondent, I like to be on the front line. And this time, in this war, I do not feel as a war correspondent. I feel as a soldier. The duty of a soldier is to fight. And to fight this war, I deploy a personal weapon. It's not a gun. It's a small book. The rage and the pride. A soldier weapon is the weapon of truth. The truth that begins with the truth I maintain in these pages. From Afghanistan to Sudan, from Palestine to Pakistan, from Malaysia to Iran, from Egypt to Iraq, from Algeria to Senegal, from Syria to Kenya, from Libya to Chad, from Lebanon to Morocco, from Indonesia to Yemen, from Saudi Arabia to Somalia. The hate for the West swells like a fire fed by the wind, and the followers of Islamic fundamentalism multiply like a protozoa of a cell, which splits to become 2 cells, then 4, then 8, then 16, then 32, to infinity. The clash between us and them is not a military clash. It's a cultural one, a religious one, and our military victories do not solve the offensive of Islamic terrorism. On the contrary, they encourage it. They exacerbate it. They multiply it. The worst is still to come. President Bush has said, "We refuse to live in fear." Beautiful sentence. But inexact, because the West does live in fear. Because we are afraid to speak against the Islamic world. Afraid to offend and to be punished for offending the sons of Allah. You can insult Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, Jews. You can slander Catholics. You can spit on Madonna and Jesus Christ. But woe betide the citizen who pronounces a word against the Islamic world. My small book is not tender with Islam. In certain passages, it is even ferocious. But it is much more ferocious with us, Italians, us Europeans, us Americans. I call my book a sermon addressed to the Italians, the Europeans, the Westerners. And along with the rage, this sermon unchains the pride for their culture, my culture, their culture that in spite of its mistakes, its faults, even monstrosities, has given so much to the world. It has moved us from the tents of the deserts and the huts of the woods to the dignity of civilization. It has given us the concept of beauty, of morals, freedom, of equality. It has made the unique conquest in the civil social field, in the realm of science. It has wiped out diseases. It has invented all the tools that make life easier and more intelligent. Those tools that our enemy can also use, for instance, to kill us. It has brought us to the moon and to Mars. And this cannot be said for the other culture, a culture which has produced and produces only religion, which in every sense imprisons women inside the burqa or the chador, which is never accompanied by a drop of freedom, a drop of democracy, which subjugates its people under theocratical, oppressive regimes. Socrates, Aristotle, Heraclitus were not mullahs. Jesus Christ neither. Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Galileo, Copernicus, and Newton, and Pasteur, Einstein, the same. My book is also educuse, to accuse us of cowardice, hypocrisy, laziness, moral misery, all of that comes with that, the stupidity and the unbearable fad of political correctness. For instance, the paucity of our schools, our universities, our young people, the people who often don't even know the story of their country, the names Jefferson, Franklin, Robespierre, Napoleon, Garibaldi, and no understanding that freedom cannot exist without self-discipline. Self-discipline. I accuse ourselves also of another crime, the loss of passion. Haven't you understood what drives our enemies? What permits them to fight this war against us? The passion. They have passion. They have so much passion, they can die for it. Their leaders too, of course. I met Khomeini. I discussed with him for more than 6 hours in calm. I can tell you that that man was a man of passion. I never met bin Laden, but I have well observed his eyes. I well listened to his voice, and I tell you that that man is a man of passion. We have lost passion. Well, I have not. I boil with passion. I too am ready to die for passion. And a civilization, a culture that cannot survive without passion, cannot be saved without passion. If the West does not wake up, if we do not refine passion, we are lost. To quote from my book, the problem is that the solution does not depend on the death of Osama bin Laden, because the Osama bin Ladens are too many by now. As cloned as sheep of our research laboratories, in fact, the best trained and the more intelligent do not stay in Muslim countries. They stay in our own countries, in our cities, in our universities, our business companies. They have excellent bonds with our churches, our banks, our televisions, our radios, our newspapers, our publishers, our academic organizations, our unions, our political parties. Worse, they live in the heart of a society that hosts them without questioning their differences, without checking their bad intentions, without penalizing their sullen fanaticism. If we continue to stay inert, they will become always more and more. They will demand always more and more. They will vex and boss us always more and more, to the point of subduing us. Therefore, dealing with them is impossible. Attempting a dialogue, unthinkable. Showing indulgence, suicidal. And he or she who believes the contrary is a fool.
I'm sure everyone here remembers the assault on the tiny European democracy of Denmark last year. Why was the Danish economy subjected to a campaign of international sabotage backed by not just movements but states? Why were its embassies burned down in countries where demonstrations are not normally allowed? Why was all this? Because its prime minister could not be forced or persuaded to censor cartoons in the afternoon press in Copenhagen because it's against Danish law for him to do this. So, you and I are members of this great profession. Did the Los Angeles Times publish those cartoons?
No, it didn't, but I wrote a column in the Los Angeles Times that began, "The editor of the Los Angeles Times will not allow you to see these cartoons."
Voila.
And went on to argue that it was a great breach of faith with the people of Denmark and with Danish democracy, and that column appeared as one of two I did about this and about the cowardly surrender.
It was one of about five that did, and I remember it vividly because you and I were in such a small minority. In a media totally dominated now by image, totally dominated by images. It was not considered appropriate to tell the American public, here's a story. It's all about the fight over some pictures, but we're not going to show you what the pictures are. The image-dominated press said, no, we're not going to show you. Neither out of solidarity with our Danish colleagues, which would be a good point, or just to show you what the fuss is about. No, they wouldn't. That's either out of fear of the religious, or it's out of fear of offending them, which comes to more or less the same thing. It's blackmail. In the United States of America, 2006, there wasn't a single member of our profession in a position to make a decision who would stand up for one day to outright blackmail. And people say to me, why do you keep mentioning the extremists? I say, because the extremists are the tail that wag the whole dog. And my profession proves it, and your culture proves it, and you were humiliated by that, because the extremists have the initiative, and because I haven't started yet. Who condemned what? I remind you, individual Scandinavians were murdered everywhere from Afghanistan to Nigeria by this hysterical, prearranged campaign. 21 ambassadors from so-called Muslim states. How dare they call themselves Muslim? In what sense is Egypt a Muslim country? You can't denominate a country as religious. waited upon His Holiness the
Well,
Pope.
and in fact, two leading Egyptian newspapers, as I pointed out in my column, did run the cartoons.
They're braver than the American papers. But His Holiness the Pope condemned what? The cartoons. The State Department condemned the cartoons, not the violence, not the campaign of intimidation. It's the Archbishop of Canterbury condemned the cartoons. Every church I know of condemned the blasphemy of the cartoons, not the campaign of murder and sabotage and intimidation. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, the barbarians are not at the gate. They're not at the gate. They're well inside. And who held open the door for them? The other religious did. The same with Salman Rushdie. When the Ayatollah Khomeini offered money publicly in his own name, without shame, for suborning of murder of a novelist who wasn't an Iranian, who lived in England. A pretty radical attack on what we think we live by, what our Constitution stands for, what Mr. Jefferson and Mr. Paine thought it was worth fighting for. The Cardinal Archbishop of New York, the Chief Rabbi of Israel, His Holiness the Pope, the Archbishop of Canterbury, all condemned what? The novel, the author, for blasphemy. Now get used to this, because you may be living in the last few years where you can complain about it. Because the religious really mean this, you know. They are not just joking. They really mean to abolish everything you care about. And they want to take away everything you love and to destroy everything you have, to replace it with a Stone Age ideology derived from the desert of Palestine in a very bad time in human history.
Now,
And just because they were there first, they think they own everything. They think they have the right to tell you what you can think, who you can sleep with, what you can eat, what you can read. And they claim the right to make you afraid, even to read, in the United States of America, this here. So I don't want to hear from anybody that my book says, well, don't judge religion by its extremes, okay? Don't do that.
And victims, well, I tell you what, I don't think Muhammad ever heard those voices. I don't believe it. And the likelihood that I'm right, as opposed to the likelihood that a shepherd a businessman who couldn't read, had bits of the Old and New Testament re-dictated to him by an archangel, I think puts me much more near the position of being objectively correct. But who is the one under threat? The person who promulgates this and says, I'd better listen because if I don't, I'm in danger? Or me, who says, oh, no, I think this is so silly, you can even publish a cartoon about it. And up go the placards, and up go the yells and the howls and the screams. Behead those. This is in London, this is in Toronto, this is in New York. It's right in our midst now. Behead those who cartoon Islam. Do they get arrested for hate speech? No. Might I get in trouble for saying what I've just said about the Prophet Muhammad? Yes, I might. Where are your priorities, ladies and gentlemen? You're giving away what's most precious in your own society, and you're giving it away without a fight, and you're even praising the people who want to deny you the right to resist it. Shame on you while you do this. Make the best use of the time you've got left. This is really serious.